Difficulties.
All right, live.
There we go.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Hi, Gerald. Hi, Sadhana. Hi, Julianne.
Hey, Amy.
Good morning. Good afternoon. We're actually spanning our time zones here. This is wonderful.
We are.
Yeah. Mel, thank you for joining. So welcome. We are a few minutes after 12, my time, 11 o'clock Pacific Daylight, 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. I'm here to open up it's going to be an interesting discussion. Gerald, Sadhana, and Julianne Victoria and I have all been talking off camera about this topic of traditional tarot decks versus contemporary decks. Well, not really versus, they're not really like going against each other, but in my time of practicing, it's been interesting to me to see the different genres, the different styles of decks that have come out from the 60s, 70s, 80s to where we are right now. And that encompasses a lot of different points of views, cultures, environments, sometimes political, that gets put into these decks. So I reached out to Gerald, Sadhana, Julianne Victoria, and tossed them this question just to see if they could tackle it, what they think about it. And we had a lot to say. We were already starting the discussion a half hour before we went live. So what we did is I asked all of the participants to look at your collection. I have a small collection, but I got 7 decks. Look at your collection and see what decks from traditional era. Now, the traditional goes from 1999 prior. Contemporary, for just this conversation, I know it'll be different for people, is from 2000 to where we are right now, 2022. Contemporary can sometimes be 10 years, but I wanted to cover this ground. So with that time frame, I asked everyone here, look at your decks, and let's get some insight. Let's get a discussion going about the differences, because there is a difference visually, spiritually, themes that were coming up here in these decks, and how we feel about them, and how some of the older decks have influenced the contemporary decks. So I hope that makes sense, this conversation. We're going to let it go. And if anyone has questions, please let us know, and I will pop it in the box below. If you have a specific question for any one of us, put the name down, and we will, or the individual will, address the question there. So hello, Evangelina. Thank you for coming back. I'm going to just pop everyone here. And, oops, sorry. We got Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for coming in. Gigi, thanks for coming as well. Julianne, we should welcome back Julianne, because there has been an absence. So wonderful to have.
Yeah, it's been like 6 months.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gosh. Welcome back.
Thank you. So let me do this. I want to ease into this so I'm not throwing everyone out into the water. I have a few questions, and let's just start with that. So the year that you started your tarot journey, like exploring decks, so on and so forth, if you can remember, it doesn't necessarily be the decks that you have right now, the decks that you were working with at that time, how were they influencing you, and what decks were those? Whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. I started with the Rider-Waite, not the giant one, but Rider-Waite, 1996. It was a boyfriend at the time had the deck, and he gave it to me. And I remember looking for information online. There was not much back then. And then the first book I read was the Book of Thoth. So so when we talk about tradition, there's like, usually people say 3 traditions: Marseille, Rider-Waite, and Thoth, or Thoth, or however you want to pronounce it. I had Rider-Waite deck and Book of Thoth, and I did not know they were considered separate traditions. So my early education with tarot is learning those as a combination. And so that's still how I will read decks, is those similar but not exactly the same traditional meanings and symbolism. Like, to me, it's one and the same, and I apply that to the Marseille when I started studying that. Like, I had no idea they're considered separate traditions, and some people are very strict about that. And me, I'm like, they all encompass very similar symbolism for the most part, with some little tweaks here and there. So that's how I started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even put those two together.
I'll hold up a Rider-Waite card, and I'll be like, this is the card of, and I use the Thoth keyword. Like,
Correct.
that's my association for the most part, except for like one of the cards. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Unless it works with a certain deck. But that's how I started reading professionally in like 2005 or 6, something like that, 10 years later or so.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last 5 years, my deck collection exploded. So, and then I created a few decks. So yeah, that's how I started.
Wow.
That's
Gerald.
amazing. I started reading in like 89 perhaps.
Okay.
And I started with the Wildwood Tarot.
Okay.
And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I actually got a traditional RWS tarot deck. So this is what I base my knowledge on. I studied this one very thoroughly, but I was also reading with the Inner Child Tarot, which was back from the 90s, and they were all fairy tales and folk tales to tell the stories. So with that in my mind, I gave it it was a very casual approach instead of some of the hardcore images that you might get in an RWS. So it sort of softened it up. That being said, I'm very aware that fairy tales and folk tales tell some very hard lessons, especially if you understand the original story and not the sanitized versions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And so that influences me a great deal, because when I see a new card, a new deck, and I'm like, and I know that it's a 4 of Cups, I'm like going, and it's so different, I'm immediately going, well, what is it in the Robin Wood?
Yeah, you go back to it.
I go back to it. That's my tarot initial language.
Wow.
So.
And what year was that again, Gerald?
It was probably 89 or 90.
89. Okay. I forgot to ask, were there any other decks that you saw at that time that were grabbing your eye, or was it just the Robin?
It was the Robin Wood. Friends of mine had like the Cat People Tarot, and I'm like going, Cat People? Why? So, and I was aware of the Thoth, and I liked the artwork, but I never purchased the deck.
Okay.
I thought the artwork was much more provocative than some of the images that we see with the RWS.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sadhana.
Well,
thank you, Gerald.
I think I was inspired by an astrologer psychic so I was teaching high school. This is before my kids. So my oldest child was born in 93. So this is before 1993. And we had several parties with teachers with this astrologer. And I was just really taken with her cards. And she had the Pamela Coleman Smith deck. And so that kind of led me into, I don't know if it was Banyan Books or where I first got my first deck. So maybe, and yeah, so the early 90s, maybe the late 80s. And just like Julianne, I found a 2-pack, and I had, so, and I also, I don't know when this came out because this is pre-ISBN. There's no ISBN on my 2-pack.
Oh,
So I don't know when ISBN started.
do you know Gerald?
I don't, not yet, but I have Google in my fingertips. I'll keep talking, Sadhana.
Yeah, so I had a 2-pack of the Thoth and the Waite-Smith deck, and so I studied them side by side.
Wow.
And so that's what I started with. And then there was a bit of a gap, and it was when my so anyway, that's where it started.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had the same, because like I just thought I like the images of the Thoth, and I thought, oh, they're just two different artistic expressions, right? I didn't know, like okay, it's all like tarot. This is what it is, and I didn't even know that there were even other decks. Like, so I didn't know that there were others out there.
Wow.
Because when I went to buy something, I bought a rune deck because I thought I have a tarot deck, and I didn't know there were out there.
Wow.
ISBN started in 1970 being used, but it has taken its time. But I actually remember somebody gifted me a pip deck. It was one of these things that you can buy at Borders or Barnes and Noble, and they gifted it to me. And I thought it was, I'm like going, what the hell is this? Excuse me. What is this? Why are there, I mean, there's 4 swords. What the, I couldn't get my head around that. I still have that, but I've gotten my head around it now.
Okay. So it's interesting for me. I came from, and I asked everyone this question now. I can't even remember the year that I started. Probably my college year, so probably in the 80s. And it was the RWS deck. And listening to you, Julianne, and Sadhana, at that time, I don't think I was aware of any other decks either, except this one, and why I went to the tarot was just because of stuff that was going on at the time. And I didn't move to the Doth Tarot until probably the mid 2000s, because I was already feeling comfortable with the RWS. Then there was another deck, the Gilda Tarot by Ciro Marchetti, which is a very fantasy, very bold colored deck that came out early 2000. I didn't include it in this, but that deck was very transformational for me. So I understood that the tarot was more than a deck of cards and pictures. There was something more into it because of my interest in the metaphysical and the occult. So that was my stance. I wanted to explore this and learn more. And then eventually I got to the Doth. And then when I saw how comprehensive, I even didn't think about the Doth and RWS. I saw them as individual entities, and that the Doth is so complex. I started working with it for probably 2 years, working with the major arcana, studying, writing notes. I have all upstairs. And then I had to stop because I had other responsibilities come in and my practice came to a halt. But even though I no longer have that Doth deck, it is very important. It's very influential. You could see it even in decks that aren't even Doth influenced. There's still that subtle nuance and influence of that deck, even with the RWS. So anyhow, it's my interest in this came from more of inner exploration than, it's a tarot deck. What is this? I knew it had validity, and that was very important. And then it just developed from there. So the decks, when you're starting your practice, do you remember what decks were out that were coming out at that time and that you started moving from? Yeah, we're going back.
I don't. I remember going into Banyan Books. Anybody knows Vancouver?
Yep.
No Banyan bookstore. I picked up the Robin Wood as well too,
Oh,
and I just fell in love with that deck and fell in love with her writing, and there was just something. It became my deck for many, many years. So I was not aware of and didn't have any connection with people that were using older Italian decks or French decks, or I didn't have any connection with that. So, yeah.
I think also too, because of where we are now, no social media, so we don't get that bombast of decks that are coming out. So when we find that one deck that we really enjoy, that's all what we know, until we start exploring, we come across something either at the bookstore or online as the web was building up, and we find more information that way, and that's how it grows, and that's how it happened with me. Go to a bookstore, you find that deck, and then you discover your second deck, and then you work with that, so on and so forth. So it's very interesting to see the whole process of where we come from, where we first started. When do you feel like you're growing more serious? Okay, I know we're still talking about the traditional aspects. If you could show some decks that you had from that time period after the Robin Wood, after the RWS, what kind of decks were coming in suit that was really drawing you in to build a practice?
Oh, it's interesting, because it was 10 years before I got another deck. Not till I started reading professionally. I still just had Rider-Waite-Smith. Actually, it was a second or third deck at that point, but at the same one. And I think the first deck, not Rider-Waite-Smith, that I got, I think was the Celestial Tarot, which I do have, but it's somewhere over there. It's just a take on traditional ones. But they were, and then I think I had, which I wish I still had because you can't get it anymore, the Feng Shui Tarot. Which had different names for the suits, but it was traditional based, right? They're all, so nothing was off tradition that I remember at the time.
Okay.
There were a couple other decks I had. I don't have them anymore.
Okay. You can mention those if they were influential.
Point, I had 5 decks, and I was like, "This is way too many." And I gave them away. And now it's oh yeah, I kind of laugh because I have probably at least 100 tarot decks right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
I think. I haven't.
No one is asking you to count, Julianne. This is not that kind of.
Well, I
this
was
is not
thinking
that
maybe
kind
we
of
need
video.
to downsize soon, but I
It
think
is in the collection.
basically, because to me they were all the same. It wasn't like Thoth and Rider-Waite-Smith, and I don't think I got a Marseille deck for a long time. I don't really remember actually.
Okay.
I think probably the Ancient Italian was my first Marseille style, but that was a little while. That was a few years after that. So, yeah.
Well, let's start showing the decks that we have, and giving a personal relationship that we have and why we went to these decks, and then we'll start slowly moving from the traditional era, if you will, to there we go, to contemporary. So again, contemporary for those who are watching, we're going from 2000 to current to 2022. But we'll take a second while everyone looks at the decks. Let's just look at some of the comments here. I'm trying my best because I want to listen to the conversation. I set up a discussion that I want to listen to everyone, but I also have to watch the comments as well. Okay, so here in Germany back in the days, it's like either you had, they call it the Crowley Tarot or an RWS. I didn't realize. That's interesting. It's interesting how in different areas there's a trend. Maybe in some countries it's more these kinds of decks as opposed to other decks. Like here, I guess in the United States, it's probably RWS and Doth, I would guess.
Well, it's probably just how it's marketed, right?
Yeah.
So the box probably just says Aleister Crowley Tarot or something. Because in English, print the U.S. version at least says the Thoth Tarot, right? So often that's just marketing.
Yeah, and there's the OTO deck, which I think is the same, correct? Or no, it's different.
I think it's different.
It is different, actually. Okay, let's see what we have here. I used my first Merrimack knockoff RWS deck for over 10 years.
Sure.
I don't know what that deck is, though. Do you know, Julianne?
It's just RWS.
It is. Okay. All righty.
And I think, the second deck that I actually remember getting that was a big deal for me was the Voyager Tarot. And for me, as an artist, visually, it's stunning. It's like, okay, I am all about that. Because I was doing artwork that was similar.
Oh, wow.
And so that was influential to me. And it did come with a large book, and this is the little book that has all sorts of tags on it because the readings were very helpful and in depth, and it added a different spin to it because now suddenly I get to look and I can weave bits and pieces of the images into my reading, and I can connect things from one card to another from a visual standpoint. And then so I read with this one for a while, and at the time all of my tarot was very serious. It's like I'm reading that book. I read the Voyager Tarot because I am a serious person. I am an intellectual, and so and then I purchased the Handle Tarot, which is not right next to me, and I got that one because I was intrigued because I didn't know what the symbols were, and I was like, "That's weird." And it came with two separate books, one for the major arcana and one for the minor. And that was my actual first introduction to Rachel Pollack because she wrote those books. And that is, I have not done the deepest dive with that deck, but it's that, back then I was taking it very seriously. And so for me, I had to be really serious while I was doing it. I have evolved since then. And so has my collection. But it was serious. It was like, okay, we don't do this just to play around. Yeah. We do this for a purpose. And it was it was part of my spiritual practice. So,
how many years was that from the time that you first got the Robin Wood that you realized this is important for you?
Oh, it was the Robin Wood. It was right off the bat. It was that connection of, it's like, wow. when I would have dreams about the cards and the characters of the cards interacting with me, and I'm rummaging through the cards and thinking, what is that Four of Pentacles, the miser, looking at? And I'm walking behind him looking to see what's on the other side. It was really, it just drew me in because I probably didn't. I only used the Robin Wood for a good 5 or 6 years, and it was intense.
Wow.
So
Wow.
So Gerald, have you seen or have the like before tarot and the after tarot and the vice versa tarot?
yes, and I love them.
Yeah,
And
because
I also have,
all three. I don't have them anymore, but like that's all those different perspectives, which is fascinating. It's
which is one of them, and I also have the in between tarot. So you have the before tarot, the after tarot, but then you have the in
Well,
between.
I think the vice versa was renamed the in between.
Nope.
No,
Separate.
it's different.
Separate?
Yep.
Okay.
It's different.
Yeah.
Well, and
And
those are modern takes on traditional decks.
which is one of the great things that I appreciate about the idea of contemporary decks. It's they have evolved it.
Mm-hmm.
Artists and creators have evolved it so that it's not only a moment in time. It's not just the snapshot.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a movie.
Yeah.
And that's how I like to think of my spreads.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see a movie, and I want to be able to tell that story, and I want to be able to give somebody cliff notes or an abridged version when they leave, because if I'm pulling out 10 cards, that's a lot of cards.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway from this?
Well, I feel I'm gonna relate this. I need to get Sadhana in here. I want to bring Sadhana in first, and then I'll answer, because I want to hear everyone's perspective, not so much mine. Sadhana, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, no, it's fascinating listening to everybody. I was very diligent as well too. And I still have one of my journals where I was going through and analyzing and working really slowly through the Goth Tarot and the plaid back Pamela Coleman Smith deck. And it was very much like what I do now. I was actually very surprised at how carefully I would look at colors or the sigils or different symbols and try to understand things. And so I was very much in a process. And when Robin Wood came into my hand, then that deck replaced everything else. And I probably read with Robin Wood, like Gerald, only for, I'm going to say, 5 years or so.
Wow.
It was a really important deck to me. And I was a young woman. I was in my 20s, and I was also, I felt, now I'm not sure when I read the extra book, but I connected with her. She has an Okinawa experience that she talks about, and it was just like, oh yeah, she's my girl. And I liked the way that she talked about her relationship with the publisher, and that she was working with the publisher and the creation of the deck. For me, that draws me in. I love to know the creator's story.
Yeah.
That builds connection with the deck.
Yeah.
And then it was this deck. And I cannot tell you how much time I've spent with this deck. Probably every single day for 3 years. And then it was my main reading deck. It was my main reading deck for a long time. I remember just sitting. So when this deck was created, Osho was at the very end of his life. And I have a feeling that Mahadeva Padma, this is a really interesting deck. The fact that it's called the Osho Zen Tarot is a representative of that that community, right? It's not, Osho did not create this deck. And the voice of Osho is definitely loud and clear. I mean, you can read a lot of the stories of this. And the extra guidebook came out much later. But I don't know, there was just something about this. And this stupid suit of clouds drove me crazy. Like,
I love that.
It was,
wow.
It challenged me in a way that, because I if you go from Robin Wood air to Osho Zen air, like this is the suit of air and Robin Wood, and it's just so spacious and light and spiritual, and they're all looking up to God, and their hair is flowing, and there's ribbons. And then we get to the Osho Zen air, and it was like, it just blew me away. And I knew that I had to spend, this is the Eight of Swords. I knew that I had to spend a long time with this deck. And I only recently, because it was in such bad shape, cut off the edges. So I was determined to read with this deck and figure out this deck. And I spent a long time with it. So I feel very close to this deck.
Sadhana, quick question. Where were you with your spiritual practice with the Osho Zen?
Oh.
When you went like into your yoga practice, meditation, was it just starting or were you already?
Yeah, it was probably just starting.
Okay.
Like there was no, I didn't have any deep practice at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you say the tarot, for this questions for everyone here, what came first, the tarot or your spiritual practice? Do you feel like maybe you were exploring spirituality and then you found this tool of the tarot and it just deepened it more, or was it the other way around?
Oh. No, I found it first. I found it in Japan.
You found the spirituality.
I found it in the gardens. I found Shinto. I found the pagan earth-centric religion in Japan.
Mm.
And I had some awakenings in Japan. So before tarot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I've always had a spiritual practice. Might have been seen as a religious practice as a child, but I've always had a spiritual practice. So tarot is just an aspect of it that has enhanced it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really challenging question for me because they were happening concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know which. I mean, and I'm a dabbler. I'm an explorer. So I bring all of the traditions forward with me as I get exposed to other things.
Mm.
So it adds a depth. So that's a bit of a challenge for me.
Okay. Well, especially with any form of spiritual practice, whatever you're exploring, it's ongoing. Some will find that one form and then take in other aspects of other practices into it, but they still focus on like Buddhism. But there's some Buddhists who practice witchcraft and they do other forms of divination. But the center core of their practice is the Buddhism. Christianity, people practice other things, but their core is Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a faith, but I do have a belief system. But it's like Gerald. I explore different things and I amalgamate it into my own practice, and it grows from there. I'm grateful the tarot's there. It's a tool, just like all the other things that are there, and it can shape it. There may be a time where I'm focusing more on one aspect of the spirituality, because it's what I need at that time, and maybe not so much of something else, like working more with nature and working less with some other aspects of my practice. So this has been the journey. So I'm very open and welcome to have this as part of the practice.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back because there was the question here that Mel put up. I think too many tarot confuses many beginners. I think staying with one deck is how I learned. What do you think? Well, we already heard from Sadhana and Julianne, 2 decks. I think it's personal. If you find one deck And in the process, like I just mentioned a moment ago, you're exploring and you find something else and you feel the two work together, go for it. There's no right or wrong answer in any form of practice that you do. It's how you make it, how you work with it. And as long as you're utilizing it and benefiting from it, I think that's what's really important for building a practice. If you have all these things and you're not putting it to its full potential, me personally, I feel it's a disservice. This is something that's here that is of interest, and work with it. You know, there's a lot to explore. There's lots of guidance to come from that. So, it's personal. You know, we saw with Julianne and Sadhana, they found two decks that just work together.
And I think it depends on the individual, how serious they want to be.
Yeah.
I think like all of us were and maybe still are very serious in the tarot study. Like I used to take diligent notes and like all this stuff and books and notepads and yeah. But if someone's like, oh, just play with some decks here and there, and they're not serious, then they might. But if you're serious, I think it is helpful to kind of maybe start with a traditional deck or a deck based on a tradition.
Yeah.
To really learn the foundation of the symbolism. I think that can be helpful because then you can grab any deck, mostly, except some very modern interpretations, and start reading with it, and then expand your knowledge and your understanding from there with the foundation. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody once asked me, you know, how many tarot decks do you need? And I'm like, and you only need one, period, ever. And the same person asked me, what deck would you recommend people start with in studying? And I actually said the Thoth, because of, just dive into that one, because either that or, and then like I would go Thoth, Tarot de Marseille, and then RWS, because of, I think there's a missed opportunity. There are so many resources now for RWS decks.
Yeah.
The depth and the close exploration and the deep meanings of the Thoth are, they're starting to become more popular.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a contrary person. If everybody's doing it, I'm not going to. I didn't get the Light Seers Tarot for like 2 years after, until 2 years after, because everybody was talking about it.
Yeah.
So that's just me.
I mean, I kind of agree, because if someone starts with a Thoth, because it's Pippish, they can then transition to a Marseille and RWS, and wherever that goes. Because I think a lot of people who start with RWS and then they see a Thoth or a Marseille deck, anything that's a Pip or a Pip, I say Pippish deck, it's like, what's the symbol? Because it's not, they've learned to just look at the picture and not the number, the color, the elements, and so on. Yeah. It's like, well, what's happening in the card, right? But with Thoth, it kind of forces you to kind of learn a blend of those, and then you can, whichever style someone likes, it can branch off in different directions more easily. But if someone doesn't like the style of it, right, they're not going to be drawn to it too. So sort of like go with what you like too. Yeah.
The Thoth for me, as I mentioned, was the third deck. And when I saw how comprehensive that deck is, it's almost like the Tarot of the Holy Light. It's like, I need a course. I want to. And I like stuff. I like when there's so much information, but I want to take my time. I want to savor it. I want to go inside the cards, like Gerald was saying. I think that's one exercise for anyone who's watching to get into the tarot. This is hard for some people, but just you literally visualize and you put yourself, I'll just put this card here. You put yourself in this environment. You place yourself in this environment. You smell everything, you feel the energy, and that's the best way to connect to each of these cards. And it's a long process. You know, you may not get through the entire arcana because you're spending maybe months on just one card to really connect to it. And
Oh yeah.
and that's what I like with these older decks, because with the exception of the Doth and a few other decks, I'm going to start going into some of the cards I have here. This is Barbara Walker. The imagery is very simple. And what I like about simple imagery is that it allows me to focus on these simple things. The color, what it means, the dress, life force, the lion, the vulture that we have here, the barren tree, you know, and I can read the guidebook, you know, get Barbara's take on it, even though she talks about something else in the book, but just feel the energy, feel that environment. And I am a very energy based reader, so it's really important that when I get that deck, it has to get me fire, air, earth, water. I have to connect to all those elements inside those cards. So the simpler it is, I can spend time into it and be drawn into the environment.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to put this.
Sadhana, you're muted.
Did any of you work with a Morgan Greer in your journey?
I haven't. No.
No.
I just recently got it.
This is one of my favorite client decks.
You know, there's something about it, and I sometimes get lost in the details. So, you know how the swords in this one are piercing each shoulder and they go down the sides of the body. I'm okay with decks that are close up in your face. Like one of my favorite close up decks is Tarot of the Hidden Realm. I love that deck. The energy in that deck is just amazing. But this one for me, I really like the colors. There's something because I have always connected to energy, and the color is so very, very important. And it's really funny. Like last night, this week I created a chart for my class, and I realized, wow, like I had gone back full circle to Tarot de Marseille colors, and we spent some time talking about, you know, what these basic colors mean and what happens when there's a purple veil and there's purple clothing.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You know, it has significance.
Yeah.
And if we're just collecting a bunch of new decks, we're not absorbing the symbolism that's in the card. And here's another thing that I have really come to believe. I feel like I was quite snooty there for a while. You know, if somebody who had not studied tarot for years and years just picked up their first deck 2 years ago has the audacity to create a tarot deck, I was like, I was like, what the heck? Like, why? How could you possibly create a tarot deck after only playing around with the tarot for 2 years? Like, I didn't understand that. And I think there's another layer here. All of this symbolism, all of the archetypes are out there in the ether. And if for some reason an artist is compelled to create a deck, I believe that somehow through the gift of spirit, they are going to absorb things that they don't even know they're absorbing. And I think now I'm somewhere, you know, in the middle, but this is something that's so important to me is I want to know the bio of the creator. I want to know their story, their history. I want to make sure that what they are building is based on a system. It's based on history. It's based on, you know, it's not an oracle. Tarot is not an oracle. Tarot is an oracle. It is an oracular tool, but it's different from an oracle deck.
Yeah. It's a tool for channeling, you know, bringing in the energies that you get from the cards, whether it's spirit guides or just a god or goddess that you relate to in the tarot. You know, you call the name of that particular deity and it speaks to you. And it's like, this is what I'm saying. You don't necessarily have to announce the name when doing the reading, but you know, you pull in that energy. So it's Sadhana. I know when we've talked in the past, we have similar connections to the tarot because of our background. And so it's, I think for the most part, everyone here, Gerald, of course, Sadhana and Julianne Victoria, we understand energy when it comes to a deck. What makes it unique for each of us is how we work with the energy of these decks and how they communicate with us. So we could have all the same one deck, do a reading. We're all going to come up with something different because it's going to be visual, it's going to be energy, it's what we're getting from it. So that's the beauty of the tarot and all these different decks. You know, we will read differently from them. Hi, Michelle Marie. Thanks for coming in. Let's move a little bit forward because I know we're 45 minutes in. But before we go, does anyone have any questions? I'm watching the comments as I can. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to address so far? We're covering the traditional aspect of the tarot and the relationship that we have with the decks. If there's any questions, please let us know. Anything else that you would like to point into when it comes to working with these older style decks? What's the experience that you've noticed with decks that you are now working with that are more contemporary, that are newer? How do you relate to those decks now versus working with the older decks?
I'll give it a shot.
It's like a final exam here.
Yeah. I think with some of the traditional decks, there's a reputation about them. The fact that they have lasted for as long as they have, there is for me, a weight that if I'm going to be using this deck, then I need to be using it respectfully. I want that, and that's just me. I want to bring that to it. It's that ancestor energy. It's that depth of experience. You know, the deck has lasted for over 100 years. There's something to it, and there's some sort of a connection. And so when I am getting a contemporary deck, I want to feel the draw to it, but I'm curious of is this the flavor of the month, or is this going to actually have some lasting power? Is this the Care Bear, of this time period? Nothing wrong with that, because some things I've collected because I'm a collector, and I appreciate that. But I have this. There's is this going to? That's why I think about decks a little differently before I purchase them, because I'm like going, is there a need that this is filling that I didn't know about? And what's that need based upon? Is it based upon something that is missing and that I want to draw it in?
Yeah.
Or am I not recognizing it around? So those traditional, or the traditional tarot, they've got lasting power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to know if some of the other decks that I have that I enjoy using, are they still going to be around in 20 years?
Yeah, when you think about the decks that I'll show this one really quick. It's one of my burning decks. This is one of the most mysterious decks for me because there's no information about this woman. And I've spoken about this on the odd occasions. Like, if anyone knows about Elizabeth Josephine Gill, this deck came out in 1989. and she brings in elements of scripture, biblical references, but also the Tree of Life, Doth inspired. It's a wonderful deck, and when you get that kind of information from a deck, it's like I want to know more about this person. So anyhow, the staying power for me with some of these older decks are just that, because sometimes we don't know where these people are. You know, they disappear. Barbara Walker, bless her heart, 92 years old. She's still alive. And I'm trying to get information, you know, about how she's doing. So, yeah, there is the respect for these older decks because of where they came from and the information from back in the time that was there and what we grew up with, you know. The contemporary decks, I'll put this question here so everyone can see that Mel pointed out. I mean, Gerald, you hit it right there on the nail. You know, we'll be on this planet for maybe another 40 years of that. And, you know, we'll see the direction of tarot. You know, we don't know if things are going to still be printed, if everything now is going to be just virtual. And that would be a shame, because we like to hold this. We like to have that connection. Yeah, in regards for making money, I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, because so many decks are being produced in quantities now by so many different people. We got the Kickstarters, Indiegogo, so on and so forth. It's kind of hard to, you know, to kind of gauge what's going to happen.
I somewhat agree with Mel that some decks seem to be created because it's trendy and it will make money. I've gotten a few decks that I thought sounded really cool and open them up and look at them and find many mistakes, wondering why they did what they did. And I can't remember if Sadhana mentioned this before we started or after, like why did they make the changes? Like, tell us why. What's the sense? What's the logic? What's the symbolism behind it? Because if it seems random and, you know, the user of the tarot deck is trying to like, wait, why is that like that? What does that mean? Is it something that's purely personal to the creator, or they just threw it together and thought, oh, this is great? I've seen we've all seen the tarot card, the oracle card industry is highly saturated right now. Like, I have 3 decks that are partially done. One is like a lot done, and I've had no desire to work on them.
Wow.
I haven't had much time, but I've had no desire to work on them because I'm like, it's so saturated out there, you know, like, not that I'm making decks to make lots of money or anything, but it's like squashed my desire to keep working on it, because I'm like, it's just going to be lost in the shuffle. And of course, if I'm not producing on my channel all the time, the word doesn't get out because I don't really do any advertising. But I feel like there a lot with publishers, but I've seen it with Kickstarters and some Kickstarters horror stories where the decks are never created, where people are just like, oh, it's a great way to make money. And you know, I've gotten some poorly put together decks, poorly thought out decks, and I would return them, or if I couldn't return them, give them away or something. Yeah, but that is out there, and that's hurts the really good decks that are out there, the well thought out ones, or the beautifully artistically represented ones. However, you know, the creator is working on it. It hurts that the good ones. There's a lot of good ones out there, and you have to sift through, and sometimes you get some duds. Yeah.
I was looking at I have a spreadsheet of all my decks. And
of course you do. I love that.
And I have sold or given away 52 decks, and all of those have a copyright with a 2 in the first number.
Okay.
Ah.
On the ISBN?
No. They're all copyright 2000 or later.
Oh.
So I haven't sold or given away any decks that are before 2000.
Mhm.
Wow, good for you.
So what does that mean? Does that say something?
It's showing where you're finding the influence coming in your tarot deck collection, where you're holding on to from that genre. You know, and I know all of us were about the same age group, so it's interesting. That's why, again, I posed this conversation to see how we feel about the decks that are coming out now, and the impact that they have. And yes, Julianne, I'm not going to make myself big because I'm going to finish up. There's it actually, all these decks are coming out. I don't even have an interest anymore. You know, it's like,
same way. Like I got to a point, like I bought one tarot deck in the past, I don't know, maybe this year, definitely. Because it got to a point where I'm like, oh, that's a cool looking deck. Oh, but I have this other one that looks a lot like it. Like there's similar styles. And because I'm a deck creator and I'll do lots of research before I do something, and a lot of that research I never use, but like I can see, I was like, oh, they use this program and that deck used that program and they're using this color palette. Like I see like the behind it, which is sort of, I guess maybe spoiled some of it for me. But so I only look for really unique, either unique created, unique artistic way of drawing or painting or whatever, or a new concept. And hopefully the concept fits in. Now I forgot my point, but yes.
I think that's a really important thing, Julianne. I think, especially with contemporary decks, there's so many decks that are available, and sometimes it's actually really. I'm glad to see the social media about people creating the deck, because I want that creator connection. I want, like Robin Wood, I connected, not as deeply as Sadhana, but when you have something in common, either a life experience or your similar age or similar makeup, I like to see what could happen. And then seeing the process of it being built. And when creators share, love that, really like that. And I want to share how they've put their energy into the deck, not just the technology they've used to do it. I want to hear, it's like I was talking to Emma, the creator of the Dream Vision Tarot, and somebody asked about the Fool and how it was misty and it not as clear as all of the other images of the deck. And she's like, well, I had a dream and this is what my guide told me to do. And it's like, I think that's a very interesting and very inspired approach. And so I love getting a snapshot into people's heads, into creators' heads. So
it really makes a difference. Monica's question: have we had any experiences with fraudulent or counterfeit decks? No.
Yes.
Recently?
Yes, within the last 2 years.
Oh dear.
I got a counterfeit Deviant Moon. It was a mini. Deviant Moon did not make a mini deck. And I got a counterfeit Mother Piece. And it's, so
That's
anything that has a QR code on the back instead of an ISBN, there you go. There's your give up. And Sadhana, you did some video about making sure, am I remembering that correctly? Making sure you're finding legit decks.
Yeah, and I recently listened to Mark Ryan talk about it. Mark was interviewed by Lavender Moon, by Amber. And he talked vehemently about not buying these decks. He said there were 14 different versions of counterfeit Wildwood Tarots out there on the market.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gross.
And I've heard people seen on Facebook justifying using and keeping their counterfeit decks. Oh, I've gotten over it. It's okay. I can use it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No. You burn them, you throw them away. You don't pass them on. You don't buy tarot decks from Walmart, or if you go on eBay, you look and see where they're from. If they're $14 and everywhere else they're $85, it's a counterfeit deck.
Yeah.
There's no deals in tarot decks. If it's a deal, it's fraudulent, and it's terrible that people think it's okay to purchase them.
There's a
I wouldn't like a reading with a counterfeit deck.
No, definitely not.
The energy is just wrong.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you cleanse it.
It's not the real deal. It didn't come from the source.
Yes.
I wanted to just talk a little bit about, I don't know if clone is the right word, but so my favorite Thoth variation is Vision Quest Tarot. And this came out in the late 1990s. This deck is incredible.
Oh, we all agree.
We all have it. This is such an incredible deck.
Yes.
I can't tell you how much I love this deck.
Yes.
See, everyone?
This is just
amazing.
Such a beautiful, beautiful deck.
Isn't it?
Oh my God. And like I can feel the tapestry in the background of this, card. And yeah. We're all on the same page. That's wonderful. And I just want to give one more tiny little plug. Okay. So the 30-year anniversary of this deck is now, this deck's been around for 30 years.
Which one is it, Sadhana?
That's the Enchanted.
Yes.
Now this is a newer version. I don't have an original version, but so this deck is celebrating 30 years, and this is an incredible deck. If you like fairy tales and you're looking for cultural diversity, this is an incredible deck that has been around and shows the test of time. It's got all kinds of cool symbology in it. And
it's a beautifully created deck, Sadhana. I agree.
Yeah.
What's the year? When did it come out?
Well, 30 years ago.
Oh, 30 years. Sorry. So sorry. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's so funny.
Yeah, all of us are holding it up. Yep.
Yeah. Everyone, this is 1998. So we're looking at a deck that's 20 plus years old. And if it still has that staying power, that's amazing. And one thing that I found out, I just got this deck recently. And when I opened up the book, the creator, because I'm now in New Mexico, is based in Santa Fe. So when I got the deck,
it's a high box.
Okay, you got the original.
Does anyone else have Medicine Woman Tarot?
I sold mine.
I don't.
I do not.
So this is from 1990. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an older deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one.
Do you want to show a few cards?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Sadhana. You were about to say something.
Okay, I got to get my thought back.
Sorry.
I lost my thought. It'll come back. Go ahead, Julianne.
Waiting to be big.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, it's going to mess up with the... Yeah, so another Native American inspired deck, though I wouldn't, if you look at the characters, it's pretty diverse. But anytime I think of Vision Quest, I pull out this one too. But I would say it's on the lines of tradition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's hard to get.
Was that 1990, you said?
1990, but it had a print. Last printing was 2013.
Okay.
At least that I know of.
Yeah. It still falls into the older deck category. As well.
But it was sort of like, kind of the next step branch. Because Carol Bridges, I forgot about that. She made another deck, and I have it. It's more modern. It's based on like her tapestry artwork.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's
Oh.
Oracle. I can't remember now. Too many. I think it's more
You got to
Oracle.
put them in order.
They
Oh,
are
wow.
sort of, but you get
Well,
too many, you stick them everywhere.
I was going to say it's interesting for the Wildwood Tarot because I think we all have it. I know, Sadhana, I know you have it.
Yep.
But it had its 10th anniversary last year, and I thought maybe that they would do something with the deck, like maybe do a revision or anything like that.
New Greenwood was coming out.
The what?
A new Greenwood tarot.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
I
didn't know
thought
that.
This is the original Greenwood.
Yeah.
And the new Greenwood is a different artist, so it's going to look different.
That's the new one that you have
Oh.
there, Sadhana?
This is the old Greenwood,
Wow.
Oh, I like that.
and it.
Oh,
so
wow.
the new Greenwood is going to have a different artist.
Oh, okay.
This was gifted to me by Anna Smith.
Oh,
I
amazing.
paid $85 for the shipping from New Zealand. That's how much I wanted it.
Oh, I like that. Wow.
Yeah.
When is the new one supposed to come out, Julianne? That you heard
I
of?
don't. Well, it was supposed to come out like a couple years ago, but it was
Okay.
like things were quiet
Okay.
during
If
the.
you're interested, Amber Lavender Moon recently did an interview with Mark Ryan,
Okay.
Okay.
so you can go and listen to that.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, our contemporary decks, because I know Julianne has to leave in a little bit of time. I think the question I posted and then we got sidetracked was the relationship with our contemporary decks, the ones that we work with. I have very little. My only contemporary deck that I have and that I read with the most is this is embarrassing because it's not. Oh my god! I just drew a blank. I'm so embarrassed. Artist is from Australia. The company is Inner Hue.
Yeah, so the artist is
Lumina
Higgins,
Tarot.
and the creator is Lauren Aletta,
Yes.
and it's called the Lumina Tarot.
Yes. When I start breaking it down, I start saying the name of the creator, then it came to me. This is a deck that I really enjoy working with. There was, unfortunately, I found this out afterwards. There were some people who were upset about the deck because of the depiction of people, because it wasn't diverse. It showed them very kind of fashionably dressed. Some people said they're on the thinner side. It didn't pose a wide spectrum that a lot of people did not like this deck. Here's another example here. This is our Fool. And that's part of the reason, again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to have people heavily represented in decks because of that association. Because if I do a reading for someone, they may find sensitivity to the imagery of the deck, and then they're going to lose the focus of me doing the reading because of how they connect to that image. With this deck, I see the people, but I don't see the association that some people had with it. This is what I saw. This deck for me holds a lot of energy in it. I'm sorry, I keep saying the word over and over again, but that's how I read. It has energy, it has movement. I think it's a wonderful, look at this card. I think it's a wonderful depiction of the suits. And it plays upon the energies of working with nature. This one too. This is another wonderful card that I like in this deck. So again, I think if I was to work with more contemporary decks, it has to be more along those lines. And in the last few years, I've begun to appreciate more pip-oriented decks because of the representation, the placement of the suits. Let's see what else I got here. This came up earlier, the King of Wands. the fox associated with fire and with wands. This deck works for me, but I personally can look beyond this. I can look beyond the person. When I see this card, I tend not to look at the person. I'm sorry. It's the overall feel. That's how I take the whole interpretation of the Lamina Tarot. And this deck came out 2015, so it's already quite a few years old. I'm surprised by that.
Okay, I'll go next because I'll have to duck out while you guys continue. So the contemporary decks, just a handful that I've worked with the most because I've pulled out, I think, 16 of them. My top one is the Mythologia Fennica Tarot, because I just connect to it very personally. It's all based on Finnish mythology. You definitely need the guidebook. I didn't pull the books out for any of these. Not traditional depictions in any way. You definitely need the guidebook.
Wow.
Background in understanding Finnish or very northern Scandinavian mythology, but this speaks to me at a soul level.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one. And this is a deck I've never used with clients. This is just for me. And it does all make sense, but you need the guidebook, especially if you're unfamiliar with Finnish mythology and stuff. The next contemporary deck that I've used a lot is the Marielle. Everyone knows. It's very thothy, thoth based, but I wouldn't call it a thoth deck, just because Marie White's interpretations are very unique, but they do make sense. Even though the sixes are all the four archangels, personally, that's not how I see them, but it makes sense in the deck. Her guidebook is a little bit all over the place. So I wouldn't say her guidebook is well written, but it's packed with information. So you have to, she knows Kabbalah, she knows this, she knows that. So if you're reading it and you're like, what? You have to look things up if you don't know where she's pulling all this information. But I feel like she compacted a lot in a small space to write the guidebook. So Marielle, Seven of Wands, that's not traditional in any way, but I can see her thoth influence in her artwork. The next one is Velarco's Tarot, and this is based on a lot of her dreams. Very unique I mean, you can see, this is the Empress, right? You can see that, but because it's based on her dreams, and there's really tiny writing in some, you need a magnifying glass. And I know I've read people complaining, why is it so tiny? It's kind of messy, or some of the images look undone. But she's like, that's how I saw it. And there's a tiny guidebook in here. So this is, I believe, self-published. I love this tower. Not traditional. You could kind of see some traditional. Obviously, she knows tarot. So any creator who knows tarot well, you're going to see some influence.
There is a larger guidebook available now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember I got I think I actually downloaded. So 2 of Wings, 2 of Air, it's it's from her psyche. So I love that. But it's not so isolated to the creator that only the creator gets it. She's been able to depict it within a system called tarot and still work within that system. Another deck I rarely ever see people talk about, I haven't used in a while, but I absolutely love, is the Ophidia Rosa Tarot. It's very botanical based. She also made the Pythia Botanica Oracle and the Maiden Oracle, which is a tarot oracle mix. And those are based on botanicals. There's botanicals in this, but they're not it's not strictly a botanical deck. What's in the card means what the card means. It's somewhat abstract.
Ooh, nice.
And you don't need to know what the plants are, but it works. I think this is the first version of it. I don't know if there's a guidebook out on this. Obviously the moon has the moon.
Yeah.
but it works. And what I love about this original version is it just came with this little leaflet. And you can read, like, for one card, like, I need light, 3 of Cups. To love the other, to flit, to fly, to flutter. And you're like, what? But the whole thing's a poem. And that's when you start to see it all come together. So contemporary deck, I mean, it is pippish. You can see 5, they're, you know, it's 5 of Pentacles. But it's not strictly along those lines. And one more, and then I have to stay for a few minutes. And then one of my own decks, the Medieval Sigils Tarot, which confuses people a little, but it is totally based on traditional symbols combined in the cards. And I do actually, part of this I read for Gerald, if you're interested. If not, I don't care. But I do talk about my process a little bit in there. But because I create it as an abstract deck, I don't give meanings for all the cards, because the purpose is to get people to work with the symbols, whether you can see the Cancer symbol there, the Venus symbol, the rune symbol or not. Doesn't matter. Some people will pick them apart and other people will just be like, oh.
And that's also the type of thing, Julianne, where I can see that, and that is what I am seeing when I look at this card this time as it relates to the reading. And I think that's a powerful deck that does that.
Like, I wanted to make no words. That's why I didn't write descriptions for all the cards. Like this is 14 of fire. So King of Wands. And you can look at that and translate that and correlate it to your Thoth or Marseille, or you can look at the image and see the powerful, I see the powerful kingliness in it. I can't tell you how many times I painted these over the course of the year. Minor tweaks, no tweaks, over and over and over and over and over, making sure. Yeah, so those are my, I guess, 5 most used contemporary decks. But I have others that are like, so like Tildwick. If anyone knows this deck, it's like totally different.
Oh, Gerald has it.
I have it, and I picked it because it's one of those, I like how some of the contemporary decks don't have human figures in them.
Yes, no humans. And then there's like Majestic Earth, which is, it's a curated deck, but a well-curated, that's another topic, curated decks. Some of them I think are just money and some are like well done. You know, or wacky decks like Carnival at the End of the World, or this is one I struggle with still, the Guardian Tarot. Totally its own thing. All the cards look very sad, so I struggle with reading with it.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense and clicks. It's very
no
shiny.
eyes.
Other times, yeah, well, they're all like tree spirits, which is cool, but it's sort of, it makes it hard to read in a reading sometimes. But other times I've had like really powerful readings with it. So this is one that's sort of on my maybe list. Like, I don't know, do I want to keep working with it? You know, and then like Great Bible Tarot, taking themes by, is it Dora? His etchings, and then a new concept where there's a 5th suit, things like that.
You got a lot.
It's like, you know, there's layers. It's not just right there. There's like layers behind all the way down. Yeah, very. So yeah, now because there's, again, on the saturated market, if I get a new deck, this is the new deck, newest tarot deck I've gotten, the Lost Tarot, which is a majors only, but it's like expanded majors. I haven't worked with it yet. I got it right before my trip, so I haven't. It's kind of creepy. It's more like Halloween season. But, you know, so it has.
That's contemporary, correct?
It's contemporary, and then it has, you know, it's number 30. They're all like major 30.
Oh, okay.
I skip 1, 32, 33, 34.
I actually like that.
It's very interesting. It's made by Dominic Murphy. You just Google him and find his website. I might miss 31, not 30. Yeah, a lot of skeletons and skulls, a little more, you know, fall season deck. But I thought, oh, that's a really interesting concept that's different. And so I got it, and I like the artwork. So that's where if I'm going to get one, just because, yeah, I kept finding myself saying, oh, that's a cool deck. Oh, wait, that looks a lot like this one in that style and this one that I have already, or those two that I gave away because I'm like, oh, they're just like this other one I have. So clones, I guess. Yeah.
I think it's important, especially with decks that are being produced now, is to find that, and I think this goes back to what Gerald was saying, and also Sadhana, let's find the uniqueness in these decks that are coming out. You know, you look back in the decks that were made in the before 2000, a lot of the decks were unique in their own way. You know, they were very, you know, maybe some that would look alike, but for the most part, they were very distinguishable. Now, some of the decks, they have similar designs, so on and so forth, and they're just like, and that's part of the loss for me too. Is like, I don't see anything original. Let me just go back to the old school decks and work with those.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And I think because I'm a creator that I'm like, like
You're also like
I have to do things kind of like Gerald, like have to do things different. So I'm creating something, and I'm like, someone else comes out with something similar while I'm doing it. I'm like, well, I got to change my whole concept now because I don't want it to be just like that. And I'll purposely not look at things or listen to things that might be related to what I'm doing. Like, little side, but even as an astrologer, when I was doing my new moon and full moon readings, I never listened to astrology, even though like stuff should be the same because it's astrology. I don't want to be influenced, right? So then I shut myself out and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to look at that. But yeah.
Yeah.
That's the whole creative process.
Yeah.
Sadhana, Gerald, do you have? What do
Okay,
you
well,
have?
I got to find out. Maybe we should do a part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably focus on.
We'll sit and show all our decks. A whole day live.
I'll figure that part of where to go with this. That's
Okay.
a bit much.
Catch up on the rest later. Bye,
Yeah.
guys.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Bye, Julianne.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All righty. Gerald, Sadhana?
Do you need to go first, Sadhana?
I want Sadhana to go first.
Okay. Muted.
Amber's being fidgety. So right now I am doing a deep dive with the Margaret Peterson Tarot, and this deck has now emerged as a and a lot of people would say this is not a contemporary deck, right? This is not a new deck by any means.
Yeah.
But now this deck will never leave my little acrylic stand over here. This is probably the third kick at the can of studying this deck. And now so this is a very energy-based deck, and it's obvious that the creatrix was deeply connected on many levels. The Tarot de Marseille contemporary version that I always have on my stand is the Tarot de Ozar. And to me, this is just like opening up, you know, one of those fans of paint chips?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Like Pantone.
That's what this deck feels like to me. And I love reading with this deck.
Oh, wow.
It is so beautiful. And if you are comfortable reading Pip style deck.
That's a beautiful Two of Pentacles.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So that's the strength card. It's just a pleasure to have this deck on the table. Yeah. RWS clones. It has Pagan Otherworlds for sure. This is a very I don't know what this is. I feel transported into this world.
Yeah.
One of the things I love is the use of the bears. So the repeating symbols are really important. And I don't know, gosh, I don't usually have this out in the summer. I went and grabbed it. It's It's an amazing deck. And this was gifted to me. So I would have never, I never knew how great this was. It's amazing.
How long have you had it?
So like 4 years.
Oh, okay.
4 years. Tarot of the She is a deck that I work with when I know people need a kick in the pants. And this is a tremendous, you can tell all the fire cards are on top. Energy. Oh my God, the energy in this deck is incredible. I have no problem reading with this deck. I've spent a lot of time with it. It's just so evocative.
Wow.
So this is a main contemporary deck that I work with. So that's one. Very, very different energy. You'll always see this one. This is the Lilly White Tarot. And I think one of the reasons I love this deck, so I'm going to see if I can find it. That's the Ace of Pentacles.
That's some of the sprouts.
And I want to show you. Oh, this is the Ace of Wands.
Nice. Very simple.
So, and then this is the 10 of Pentacles.
Okay.
Right? So you see
nice.
You see the fulfillment. This is Temperance. And I also have the black version of this deck, which is not, it's a different deck. It's not the same. That's the Magician. So this is a deck that I use all the time. That's the King of Fire. Yeah. And the wheel. I'll show you one more. That's the wheel card.
Wow. I have a question for you, Sadhana. And from the decks, I know you mentioned that you have more of your older decks as opposed to contemporary. Do you find that the decks that you have right now, the contemporary ones, are becoming more abstract in the way that they depict the arcana? Are the images a little bit more so that you can connect more in an intuitive way as opposed to the traditional ones? I see like a color scheme in some of the newer decks that you have, and they tend to be a little bit more in the abstract sense of.
Yeah, I'm an intuitive reader. I have studied the tarot a lot, but color and energy play a big part into my readings. And so I am a lot more discriminating in what I'm going to pick up. I have a whole bunch of decks that I don't use, and I've hummed and hawed about keeping them and not keeping them and so forth. So yeah, I mean, probably the most recent deck, and somebody gifted this to me as well too, because they thought it was in my aesthetic, is it's a French deck. It's called Tarot Ramour au Étrange, Tarot of the Strange Branches. And it's like Lily White meets Tarot of the Hidden Realm.
Oh, it does look like that.
And
wow.
Nope. Oh, here, I want to show you this one. This is a really cool card. So this is the Reine de Pique, so the Queen of Swords.
Oh, wow.
She's got the sigil on her solar plexus. So whoever gifted this to me knows me well. So that's a 7 of wands. That's a 7 of wands.
Wow. I use the hands. So different, right? It's amazing.
And what's the name of that?
Tarot of the Strange Branches in English. So tarot. Maybe somebody can type it in the chat. I don't have the box or the book here, Gerald. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm thinking about purchasing responsibly and knowing my limits. But you're right, there's a significant draw to that.
This is the Two of Pentacles.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you've got the water in the background,
yeah.
and you're looking at balance from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all feminine in all females in the deck. So the kings are the goddess and the queens are the queen. Oh, and here's a lover's card with one person in the card. Sorry about the shadow.
It's okay. Gigi put it up there. Do you see it, Gerald?
Yep. That's
Wow.
just one person in the lovers is great.
Right? So there they are, naked, lying in the meadow.
Yeah. Wow. And you can feel it in that card.
Yeah. So the and the Ace of Cups is kind of mysterious. It's not, it's kind of dark.
Mm.
Who knows what's bubbling up here?
Wow.
I was surprised. I was surprised at how. So what is it? So what is it about a contemporary deck? So this is slightly different cards, different system, but there's a flow of energy. The color palette. So there's a limited color palette.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it different, you've got to commit to what you're doing. I don't know how to explain.
It's going back to what Julianne and you were talking about. Please, for creators, they probably think they're explaining or they're producing something that they think people understand. And we also have to keep in mind that sometimes these creators are young and they're still. I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're still growing. They're still maturing. So what may make sense to them may not make sense to us and someone else, and then we critique it, and then they start getting defensive. They don't appreciate it,
and it's a challenge to be able to express what you're feeling intuitively or energetically. Sometimes it's like, I don't know why I like it, I just like it. So
yeah, I agree.
So with the Wildwood Tarot, which is a contemporary deck, and it's not the same as the Greenwood. The wheel of the year is different in this deck than in the Greenwood. They don't transpose. So why this deck stays over there all the time is because I spent so much time with it. So I have memorized the timing of where every single card is on the wheel.
Oh, excellent.
And so I'm able to look at it through a wheel of the year lens very specifically. And because of the image that I have in my mind, I can also transpose this to a Southern Hemisphere mood.
Okay.
There's not one tarot deck out there that is Southern Hemisphere centric.
This one does it. That's the card I have.
And so if you're working with a Wheel of the Year deck, then you can transpose the seasons 180 degrees and it works. But
do you use the not Wheel of the Year, the Wildwood Tarot for seasonal readings with other decks, or just exclusively the Wildwood Tarot? So another deck that you can feel.
I don't know.
Just
like
that one.
August 1st.
Yeah, Llamas.
Probably use Herb Crafter.
Herb Crafter.
Because I'm going to start a deep dive with that deck on my channel. But I'll do a reading for myself with this deck.
Okay. I think Vision Quest 2, when looking through the little white book, I think it's also something that you could work through seasonally More the Four Seasons, not so much the Wheel of the Year. She makes reference to it. And since I just got this deck, I'm still working with it. But I could see some relationship to fall, winter, summer, and spring.
I recently started working with the Red Seeds Tarot. And this is a spiritual quest for me. So the Red Seeds Tarot is based on the initiation of the Mistai. And these were not just men. These were women and men were initiated into this tradition. And so the whole deck goes through the process of initiation of this Greek initiation. And so for me, this is a what is this? This is an immersion into Greek mythology, just taking what I already know to a much deeper level. And I knew when Linda Hill created the tarot deck that I would be able to start working with the oracle.
Wow.
But this is a very specific kind of energy, and I feel like this is more of a study. And the other funny thing, Gerald, so another reason why I purchased this deck was because of the bee connection. So any deck that has bees in it, I feel like I've been told by somebody on high, you need to work with the bees. So the suit of swords in this deck is the suit of bees. And that's, I guess that's why also the journey of the sacred bee is, it's sitting right here too. I have lots of work to do with that. And then everything Julianne said, like the Marielle, the Velarcos, there was another one, but yeah, so I have a lot of decks.
Yeah, I think it's, again, very important to, not limit yourself to one set. So like I said, even though I'm more on the older school of decks, there's still more to learn with authors who are creating decks now, especially authors who are our age and they are creating decks, because then we can see that their interpretation and we can relate to it because of the way that they created the deck, the way they described the deck, how they got to that point in the deck. So even though I just have like 2 or 3 decks that are contemporary, they still work. And I also like to have decks that I can put with some traditional decks. It's kind of hard, but again, I would do that more energetically than anything else, than visually. You have another one, Sadhana?
Yeah, it's okay. I have decks here.
All right, Gerald, you are up.
Okay,
and thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So one of the things that I am fascinated with contemporary decks is the ability to connect to them and to actually find that they connect with the people for whom I'm reading. Like This Might Hurt tarot deck. It is a deck that when I've used it, people they relate to it. And so it's an RWS clone per se, but not really a clone, but it's people who I'm reading for, they can see themselves in it. They can understand the experience. So, so This Might Hurt is one of those lovely ones. And I think I have Sadhana to thank for introducing me to the Sasarabito. And the Sasarabito is one heavily RWS influenced. However, it is translated beautifully through the creator's heritage. And I was part of what I was doing is I was looking at specific cards like this, the 10 of Swords. Oftentimes we see the person face down with them in the back, and you can look at that and go, well, are those really there or are they not there? Is it an energetic thing? Three
Oh,
of
wow.
Swords is one that I'm always looking at. The Tower and how that comes across, and the Hierophant. But and that being said, I love the Fool in this card. It's like, I
Oh,
want to be
wow.
this person. I want to be
It's a
this
great
person.
Fool card.
And I was showing it to a friend of mine as I was preparing for this last week, and she's like, how is that the Fool? And I'm like going, because he has the Fool energy and the excitement and but the wisdom to come along, and he's not held back by that, and that maturity just is a wonderful reminder of that. One of the other things that I love about the tradition, the contemporary decks, I love it when there's no people in the cards, like the Spacious Tarot.
Yeah.
What a wonderful opportunity, because sometimes I use the tarot as a writing prompt. So
Yeah.
I'm going to tell a story. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
the energy is there, but it's not clouded by people. I can put myself into the cards rather than I'm seeing someone else in the cards. I want to walk up and I want to look in each of those 8 cups
Yeah.
as I walk away. And so that energetic switch. Now, this one I enjoy. It's called Life is Like a Board Game Tarot.
Oh.
Uh, it's a funny deck because let's take a board game that we all know that I'm not going to name, but let's look at it and to go, let's summarize this. This is a great deck for,
Oh.
so you can see the 4 of Wands is Joyous Home Gardens. And it's like, it just summarizes it very, very succinctly. And, like the 2 of Wands, Forward Movement Gardens.
Mm.
It's a challenge to summarize a card
Yeah.
in like 3 words. But this is one that works well.
Do you get visuals when you look at those words?
Sometimes I get visuals, but what works really well is for me to lay on another card.
Okay.
I can lay this on top of that. And so we have the 8 of Wands being influenced by Forward Movement Gardens.
Okay.
And so this is one that can sometimes set a backdrop for me.
Okay.
But I also have the Wild Unknown. And what's interesting about Wild Unknown, I'm pulling out the pocket because I know it's definitely contemporary. But the Wild Unknown took pip decks and gave it a different flair. There's still no humans, but and they're pips plus something. And I know this is some people really like this or they don't like it. I have to say, when I saw it energetically, my hands tingled. It was like, boom.
Mm.
Do you have that one too, Amy?
I mentioned it earlier. I'm on the fence about it. I don't know what it is. I have the animal spirit to work with animal energy, but I posted some notes here about the Wildwood Unknown. Interesting enough, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut into you, Gerald.
Go ahead.
The Wild Unknown originally was released independently. I'm looking at my cheat sheet in 2012. And then the mass production of the Wild Unknown, not the pocket version, came out in 2016. Now, the reason why I'm stating that is the Lumina, this came out in 2015. So I'm just mentioning it because of the similarities. There were a series of decks that I think came out for a short period of time where they were doing very similar design. I'm not saying that the creator took the idea, but the energy is there. This is a beautiful card as well. So I think the reason why I'm on the fence with the Wild Unknown is because imagery wise or style wise, kind of reminds me a little bit of this.
Sure.
But I think maybe at some point I will probably get at least the pocket version.
Hmm.
But yes, sorry.
No, one of the other things that, people who've watched my channel, they know I am a big fan of the transparent tarot. And I think what this contemporary deck did is it gave us, because of new technology, I can print on clear plastic. I can layer that actually, literally, instead of having to do it for myself, that
You
people
build a
can see
story.
it
Yeah.
and build that story. And I've talked about this because that's how I like to read. I like these layers upon layers upon layers. And I have not actually, I have not layered this on top of the Tarot of the She yet. To be honest with you, I'm a little scared because sometimes I might get smacked upside the head, but sometimes I'm okay with that, and other times I don't want that. um, so
You
I
can make
just
the
know myself.
call.
Yeah, yeah. I just did a deck casual about this Dream Visions tarot, and the ability to use technology and color in a way
Oh,
that is
wow.
so striking. It's like, okay, there's
Wow.
something about this that is energetically, it works quite well for me. So,
How do you
um,
feel about that one, Sadhana? I'm thinking about you when I see this deck.
I can pass.
Okay.
mhm, yeah. So,
Hmm.
and then we had already mentioned the Journey of the Sacred Bee.
Yes.
Beautiful deck, layers and layers and layers. Contemporary deck, Spirit Keepers Tarot, where there's so many layers. This is one I have been studying for the last 6 months, and then independent creators, they can make decks available, and the technology is out there. So I like the Zany Tarot. My friend Zane created this, and it's not just because of him, but it's contemporary, it's confrontational in a way, um, it's inclusive, and sometimes I just want that little bit of different flair
Yeah,
for me. And so, and that is one of my favorite Eight of Wands ever.
I
It's like,
like that.
there you go.
Yeah,
So
all encompassing.
yeah, so that's what I have. I mean, I have lots
Yeah.
more, but that's what I have.
How do you feel when you do your studies? This is for you and Sadhana. How do you feel when you do your studies in a particular deck? Um, it does influence your readings from that point onward, does it not? Do you feel that shift? Do you start looking at decks that you read before after spending time on a particular deck? Do you go back to that deck and see it differently? Do you read it differently? How does that relationship come into play when you focus on the deck?
When I focus on a deck and I discover something new about this person's interpretation of it, um, it does inform me as I look at other decks, and I want it to. I want it to be an expansion of that. And yes, it influences, and because sometimes I'm the type of person who I will do 2 or 3 decks in a spread, and if I get the same card
Mm-hmm.
with all 3 decks, okay, how are these the same? How are these different?
Yeah.
So,
Well, they read differently, obviously, because of the different energy. Sorry,
mhm.
the
No, that
different.
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
It's how they relate or not relate to each other. You
Yes.
know.
Yes.
How do you feel, Sadhana, when it comes to doing these deep dives and connecting it with other decks that maybe you don't read so often or you go back and reflect upon? Do you see a difference?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Sometimes I think I can contain it within the energy of that deck. Other times it will forever change how I view a certain card. And that happened recently with the High Priestess in a deck. So
Wow.
because the High Priestess was on the other side of the veil and we were seeing from the inside to the outside.
Ah,
And so that was
interesting.
beautiful. I really liked that.
So there's that makes sense. The placement of, you actually hit a point there, the placement of the archetypes in the major arcana, direction where they're facing, if they're facing left, right, facing towards you, if they're high above or off to the side. I think that's a wonderful observation that just hit me. It's like, yeah, that's one way to see, because each deck will place those arcanas in a different, in a different way. So we'll see those differently. They have the name. This is the emperor, but the emperor is being read differently. So that's very important. All righty, we're about 2 hours. I'm going to just show one other contemporary deck. I showed the Lamina Tarot, but this is one deck that I found on another channel, Anna Astrolady. She had this deck a few years back during the pandemic, and I saw it, and it got my curiosity. And it's the Crow's Magic. This is 1998. I got 2 decks here, Vision Quest and Crow's Magic. This could have been part of decks that came out around that time where digital art was coming in. And so I have these in orders. It's an interesting deck because we do see the play of color. A majority of the backdrop is against the black background. But again, you focus on, on the imagery, what's happening there. You do have the keywords. Some people don't like keywords, but I can either use it or not. I take it, or leave it. I'm going back to an older deck, but this is just, it's wonderful because you have all the symbology of the image of the animals here. You have the moth, the jaguar, the deer, the eagle, all very strong representation for the Empress in this card. And it's one of these decks that I am learning, and it does have astrological associations that I'll put here right there on the bottom. I think I'm going to start working with this deck for the decans. There is a series in one of the signs here in this deck where I think the decans don't seem to be correct. I have to look back at it. But regardless, that's something that I can take or leave. But I appreciate this. I mean, we got a lot of movement here. It's a very unique deck, and it's something that I can work with. I think I can even bring this into like this energy, because we have the opposite color scheme, but the energy is still kind of there. So it's very unique. Crow's Magic was created by Londa Marks, and I'd like to see if I could reach out to her, if she'd be interested in doing a discussion about her tarot, if she's even doing tarot anymore. I'm not certain if you're familiar with this deck, the Crow's Magic.
I've seen it on Anna's channel. I really like Anna. She's great.
Yeah, she has a very humorous approach when it comes to some of the older decks, because I think she calls this deck the weird one. She's like, she goes, "This is a weirdo. This is a weird deck for me," but she's still drawn to it, and she's trying to understand it. And that's interesting because she is younger, but there is something that moves her for this deck. I think she was probably maybe a few years old when this deck came out,
Yeah.
or a teenager.
I have the deck, and I will use it for some magical work.
Ah,
So that's how I was introduced to it.
ah,
So
yeah, it's very interesting. I really like it. I can't really pinpoint specifically, but there is energy. There's something very very strong for me with this deck.
yeah.
Crow's magic. Alrighty. So the question that I was going to ask you before we went live, I think was already answered. The relationship of contemporary decks, how we feel about these decks now versus the traditional decks. I feel that we covered that through the insight of talking about these specific decks. Do you have any last words, or is there anything that you're working on? Feel free to promote anything that you have coming up. No. Okay.
I'm doing something on Monday. I am doing a casual about how I prepare for my deck casuals.
Okay.
So, because some people have asked that, and the deck casual is, I have guests on. Sadhana was on with Jilly and Kelly Burton, where we talked about this deck. But people have asked how I prepare for it. So that's it. I'll be doing that, and I didn't realize that it was a seemingly simple process for me, but when I actually wrote it all out, it's a like a hashtag overcomplicator, hashtag overachiever. I am like going, whoa. But it's actually a really good process for me, especially when I'm hosting. So these are the things that I consider, and the process takes 3 or 4 days, actually more often 4 or 5 days, because I'm looking at it from that frame of mind. So that's what's coming up.
Okay. And that's next Monday, correct?
It's next Monday at 2 Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.
Okay. And you do your lives Mondays, Tuesdays,
Wednesdays? I do usually Mondays at 2 and Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern.
So everyone take a look. I love Gerald because he has such a this was a very serious conversation, so it was pretty more on the deeper side of things, but Gerald has such a wonderful humor and just like if you want to feel light, go and watch Gerald's channel. Lots of humor. And it's always good to hear and learn things. He brings in guests, deck creators. So I know Ange put in, let's see here. Here's Gerald's channel. Okay, so everyone,
thanks, Ange.
Please feel free to check in. And Sadhana, what do you have coming up?
Oh, I have
a lot.
So I started a course. I started a 22-week tarot course, just winding up the second round of it. And I'm really enjoying this process. And I've committed to teaching it 2 more times. But I want to the next set is starting in September. I want to turn it into a pre-recorded package that you can buy, and I'm going to take all my course material and put it into a book. So what I'm doing right now is editing that book, and I don't know how I'm going to create my own manual, basically. So that's also in the works. I'm also creating a journal that I'm going to publish. And I am, for the first time in ages, I'm looking for the card. One of you asked about this card. I'm looking for that.
Let me bring it up here. Sorry about
that. I am, for the first time in ages, running a retreat. So I'm doing a retreat in the spring.
Saw that.
And so I have started a little bit of marketing for that. So I'm really excited about that. A healing
next summer?
Spring.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm mixing up decks here. So the answer to that question about the High Priestess on the other side of the veil, it was in Tarot, the Red Seeds Tarot. And I was looking for the card. But of course I can't find it.
It's probably on the bottom, the last card. Shall we all guess?
Here it is here. So if you look, and you know, maybe it's just my perception, but to me it looks like she is inside the temple and we're looking from the inside to the outside. That's what I see.
That's the moon behind her, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we can, I don't know, it was just something about it that flipped my switch. She's not the gatekeeper. Why would she be the gatekeeper? It makes no sense that she's the gatekeeper.
Yeah, I don't see that in the card. I don't feel that energy at all.
So I don't know. It was just something about that switched for me. Anyway, I have lots of stuff going on. Just go to my channel, go to my website, and my website is kind of clunky, but
okay,
you'll find
if you can answer Mel's question really quick.
So that is starting on Wednesday, August 3rd on my channel.
Okay, excellent. All righty.
Love that.
Any other questions? Anyone before we sign off? So we can let these beautiful souls go and do what they need to do. And I want to thank you both, Gerald, Sadhana, and Julianne.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
I'm sorry it was a very straight, serious conversation, but
I'm not. It was great.
there's just a lot. There's a lot to process. So it's focusing on so many different decks and the influences and the differences between these genres, which I feel is evident, and touching upon the contemporary decks. Everyone who's watching this, if you've gotten this far or you scroll forward, I think it is very important to be mindful with the decks. If you are moving into a practice, people are heavily promoting a lot of decks out there. Don't roll into it. You got to slow down that process and look at the cards, look at the decks, and see what speaks to you. Because then next thing you know, you may end up with 20 decks when you just wanted to get one or two. And then it ends up being something you have to, deal with.
Yes, and I think we've all really talked about how the importance of a deep dive into a deck will really help learn, broaden our horizons, help us connect to a deck. I think that's, and you can do it in multiple ways. You can go through the guidebook, or you can just sit down and look at the cards and journal about it. And there's a lot of great ways. I think for me, this is a good reminder that the idea that I have of, I'm right now I'm doing a deep dive into the Spirit Keepers Tarot. Next up for me is the Thoth. And, it's just to be curious about it and to go, what can I take from this? How can I learn? How can I connect with this?
Yeah.
So I think it's great.
I also like to recommend when someone gets a deck, just start journaling. The journaling will add so much more to it. Instead of looking at the deck and just putting the deck away, write down, like I was saying earlier, visualize, pour yourself into each of those cards. It'll take some time. Go with a deck that moves you. Don't go with the deck that's the deck of the day or the week or the month. Find that deck that you work with. And you'll never forget it. You never forget that first deck that you had and the experience that you get from it.
Yes.
So, and all of us here on the panel, we have that experience, and we learn from it. So heed the call, and see what comes from it. All righty. Thank you, everyone. Please stand by, Gerald and Sadhana. We won't stay on for too long. I want to thank everyone for watching, your patience, your questions. This was very important for me and to share with other readers hear their experience, and that's why I want to focus on this topic. Though it's broad, you could see in our discussions that we have different experiences and how important going through different genres, going through older decks and newer decks to see both sides of the coin, both sides of the influences of these genres. I think it's very important. So show support for Gerald, show support for Sadhana and for Julianne. And of course, feel free to check in here on my channel. I have some stuff coming up. It's going to be the astrological decans. I have those readings coming up soon for the month of Leo. And if I may say, because Sadhana, I know you already announced it, I want to wish you a happy early birthday. And so I look forward to seeing what you may have coming up around that time. And everyone, be safe, be good. Any questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. And I will see everyone again soon. Again, Sadhana, Gerald, stand by. And everyone, be good. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.